Hello, my name is John Akers from the University of Washington Reality Lab, and this video is the start of a series introducing you to WebXR and how to make your own XR applications in the browser using the framework AFrame. So WebXR is a specification defined by the World Wide Web Consortium that defines how a browser can access a VR or AR device tethered to the computer or from a browser on the device itself. And this, in combination with WebGL to create 3D content, can be used to create fully immersive XR applications that run in your browser. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of WebXR. Some of the benefits are that it's largely device agnostic, and that augmented and virtual reality devices can access content in the same way because they're running through a browser. And likewise, it can often work on desktop computers and mobile phones as well. It's also extremely powerful for rapid prototyping. Because you're running out of a browser, there's no special tools you have to install on your computer, and you can also edit your applications in real time to test out different interactions and functionality. There's also a massive ecosystem of existing web tools already available, defined for browsers, and because WebXR is defined in the browser in the same way, you can attach these libraries and frameworks seamlessly into your WebXR applications, including different types of network infrastructure, audio libraries, graphics tools, or anything else available on the web. However, there are some downsides to WebXR. Because it's running through a browser, there's another abstraction layer between the device and the application, which can limit performance sometimes. It's also a growing standard, and such, because it's implemented in different ways on certain browsers, if you're using special functionality, you might have to be aware of how it's implemented in different ways and have your application adapt for the different types of browsers to be able to use it. You also can expect the same headaches you'd find in regular web development, oftentimes finding that unexpected behavior can occur, and you might not get any error messages and have to debug your code yourself by going through it line by line. So how can you get started with WebXR development? You could take native WebGL and link it into the WebXR API itself to build your own applications from scratch, but I would recommend using existing 3D engines and frameworks available. Some of the most notable are things like Three.js, which is a 3D engine that already has some WebXR support, or AFrame, which is built on top of Three.js for full WebXR support, and the framework we'll be using in this tutorial. There's also Babylon.js, which is very similar to Three.js in being a 3D engine. Prismatic, which is a JavaScript library built specifically for the Helio browser on Magic Leap mixed reality headsets, and React 360, which is its own 3D for WebXR framework designed on top of React. So let's talk a little bit more about AFrame. It's HTML-based with JavaScript document object model manipulation for its interactions. It supports virtual reality and augmented reality modes on all common headsets and mobile devices, and uses an entity component system model very similar to how Unity or other game engines work. It also uses events and handlers for its interactions, much like you'd find in traditional web development. Now let's understand a little bit more about entity component system design, which contrasts inheritance as you might expect. And entity component systems have three different elements to it, as you come to expect. It has entities which serve as the empty containers or the things or objects of the world. And these entities are defined by the components associated with them. And so components are modules you can attach to different entities, with each component defining some type of functionality or behavior or appearance, and this combination of components on each entity is what makes that entity unique. You also have systems which behave very similar to components, but work on a global scope and communicate with different types of components that are related to each other to handle things like your universal principles of your virtual world. So let's go into an example of an entity component system. Say we have three different entities here. We have a rabbit, a whale, and an orca that all have their own behaviors. And we have these components to define those behaviors. We have rabbits that hop, we have whales that swim, we have orcas that also swim, but orcas also hunt. And so let's say we want to have another entity. Let's say we wanted to have something like a killer rabbit. And if you want to have a killer rabbit, you have a couple behaviors you want associated with it. So you want to have your ability to hop, but you also want to have the killer rabbit hunt. And if you were thinking in an inheritance system, you'd imagine it gets quite messy here because of the way that an inheritance chain would have to overlap between these different types of entities. But because we're in an entity component system, we can very easily associate a hop component and a hunt component with our new killer rabbit entity to create an entirely new entity or thing in our world with this functionality in a very modular way. Let's also relate this to how systems work. So maybe you have three different rabbits that all hop. And you want to have the gravity of your world change over time. And so you can define a gravity system that communicates with all of the individual hop components associated with each rabbit to tell the hop components how they're supposed to change over time based off of how your gravity changes. So now we've talked a little bit about how WebXR works and how AFrame and Entity Component Systems work. Let's actually dive into the code a little bit. In the next video, we're going to explain our programming platform, glitch.com, as well as a little basics about HTML and JavaScript to get started.